Welcome to the Defiant Podcast. The Internet of Money is being built with blockchain technology and without banks. We call it DeFi, short for decentralized finance. And this is where you can hear the builders and users of this cutting-edge world tell their stories firsthand. I'm your host, Camila Russo. In this week's episode, I speak with John Crane, the co-founder and CEO of SuperRare Labs, one of the top NFT marketplaces. SuperRare wants to differentiate itself by being the NFT platform that best curates art specifically. John believes the natural evolution for NFT platforms will be to specialize in verticals. For example, the interface for art should be different than the one for real estate, domain names, and so on. The team recently launched a token and a DAO, and John explains how the move will be instrumental for SuperRare to scale its curation, as the original team gives up control and other participants propose and vote on what should go on the platform. We talk about the NFT boom more broadly and how John believes NFTs are enabling the first artistic revolution since the internet. And the movement includes changes in form with VR, AI, video, and audio, but also in the way people collect, with art becoming more democratized. This time around, the revolution is also global for the first time, and more open, as NFTs, which are becoming the art world's new certificates of authenticity, are all public and with trading history that's open for all to see. Before we get to it, here's a word about our sponsors. The new Kraken app is one of the best places to invest in some of the most popular DeFi assets like Uniswap, Aave, Polkadot tokens, and more. Just download the app and get started in minutes. Plus, you can earn additional rewards through Kraken's industry-leading staking product. Payouts are twice a week, and you can earn up to 20% annually on some of your favorite cryptos. Sign up today at kraken.com/defiant or type Kraken in the App Store to learn more. Don't let high gas costs keep you out of Ethereum. At Balancer, you can trade all you want and get most of the gas costs back in your pocket. In their new BAL for Gas campaign, traders are receiving 6 figures worth of BAL tokens every week. And with V2 just around the corner, Balancer is becoming the one-stop shop for DeFi liquidity. Balancer V2 brings stable pools and weighted pools tightly integrated under a single protocol, flash loans, lending via asset managers, and much more. Check it out at balancer.finance. Enzyme provides an easy way to build, scale, and monetize DeFi investment strategies. If high gas prices are shutting you out of DeFi, fear not. Enzyme is now running a gas subsidy program. The app makes it easy for investors to pool together on strategies, lowering costs. The Enzyme interface allows anyone to trade, lend, deposit to AMM pools, farm, stake, and more. It is a non-custodial solution and allows for real-time reporting, security, and transparency. Sign up today on enzyme.finance. Experience DeFi. Deposit, earn, and borrow on Aave. Aave is a decentralized, open-source, and non-custodial liquidity protocol to earn interest on deposits and borrow assets. Deposit and start earning interest in real time directly in your wallet, and swap any of your deposited assets at any time to get some of the best deals on the market. Aave protocol liquidity pools are now available on Ethereum and on the sidechain Polygon. Head over to app.aave.com to get started today. The Index Co-op is on a mission to make crypto investing simple, accessible, and safe for everyone. They've built the market-leading index products, DPI, the DeFi Pulse Index, MPI, the Metaverse Index, and BED for one-click crypto exposure. Additionally, their flexible leverage series grants safe 2x exposure to popular crypto assets like ETH or BTC, with low liquidation risk and low cost to maintain your position. To buy or learn more about these products, go to indexcoop.com. All right, here we are with John Crane, the founder of SuperRare. John, it's so great to have you in the Defiant Podcast.
Absolutely, Camilla. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Okay, so John is co-founder and CEO of Superware Labs, one of the top NFT marketplaces. Superware recently launched a token and a DAO, which is a bit different from what other NFT marketplaces are doing. So I'm super excited to get into all of that and more. But to start, I just love to just learn more about you, your background, what were you doing pre-crypto, what led you to crypto, and then what led you to found Superware.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll try to keep it a little bit short because it's a very meandering path. But yeah, I was actually studying civil engineering and architecture in college, and that's when I learned about processing, which is a programming language for it's kind of like designed to help artists learn to code. And I was a big doodler, so I started like playing around and kind of like teaching myself to code, and just got like very excited. Just kind of like slowly started falling down, that rabbit hole, like making websites and things, and decided I was actually not going to go into architecture, and so moved to New York, worked in advertising, and while I was in New York, I was going to a lot of different meetups, and one of those meetups I found was the New York Bitcoin meetup, which was very exciting. I had been like kind of reading about Bitcoin online a little bit, but was still like really confused. I think I remember like getting there to the meetup, and the first question I asked, like, what exactly is the hash rate? Like, I keep reading about it, but like, I'm just not sure what this is.
A totally valid question, to be fair.
Yeah. I had been like reading, I had read so many blogs, and I felt like I was just getting like more confused after each blog post I read. But that was just like, kind of like every day was just falling more and more down the crypto rabbit hole. And that was right around the time that the counterparty protocol had launched. So I was like kind of interested in like colored coins, and like thinking about like, like I was very excited about the idea of sound money, but also like, okay, how could we take this idea of like native internet value transfer and also like bring it into consumer web experiences? And, just hanging out as part of the meetup. Eventually I saw the Ethereum, the work happening on Ethereum, which I was like actually very skeptical about at first. But then once the network launched, I started like experimenting with Solidity and smart contracts in general, and just got super excited. And so I went to go work with, at the time I was working at actually like an eyewear startup, but left to go work with Consensus in Bushwick, and was with them for about 2 years. Doing a whole bunch of different things, focused on one of their spokes called Block Apps, which was kind of like enterprise Ethereum. And that was really interesting. Like I did a lot of like, I don't know, kind of like education, I guess, with some of these bigger companies that were trying to figure out like, what are blockchains good at? What are they not good at? There's a lot of things they're not good at, a very small set of things that you should do with a blockchain. And that was all really interesting, but like kind of in the back of my mind, I was still thinking about like, for me, what's exciting about Web3 is just like how this is going to impact like internet business models. So thinking about like so many of the social platforms have like advertising like built into the core. And so what does it look like if you have products that don't need to rely on advertising? And so when I saw NFTs, I got really excited just thinking about all of the things, like all these digital objects that exist that do have unique identifiers. And like maybe this standard was a way to kind of like start to bridge like the consumer web we all know and love with crypto, and kind of like build something a little bit better.
Oh, that's interesting. So was your first kind of take on NFTs a way to reduce ads in the way that we just consume the internet? I mean, coming from an ads background yourself, like that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like sort of like intellectual curiosity, like what would it look like if this wasn't the business model? And so like early on, we would like when we were like discussing just like Super Rare and NFTs, it was like, okay, well, what if YouTube, like you could just have owners of videos. So there's like the person who created the video still, you can still see that, but then like, what if you could sell it? Like, do the views now count towards the owner, or like how, like how do these mechanics work? And like, could it be this like, because that's still kind of like internet real estate. Like if on the main page that's getting like 100,000 hits a day, it says your name, that, like that's definitely worth something. So like, anyway, yeah, it was just sort of an interesting exploration.
Still unsolved. I mean, yeah, at some
Yeah.
other point, I'd love your thoughts about kind of media and NFTs. But okay, so how did that lead to Super Rare?
Yeah, so that was kind of like back, like I was saying, in college, I was super interested in processing, which is this like generative art programming language. And being in New York, I was kind of like on the periphery of the art scene. So I had friends who were really trying to make it as artists. And I had a friend who ran a gallery. So she would come to New York for a lot of the different art fairs that I would go to. And I just found it interesting that like all the art I was really interested in was like, had GitHub repos, and it was like purely digital. And then it'd go to these like super fancy art fairs. And it's, nothing against like sculpture or like oil on canvas, but it was just like, to me, there's all this interesting creativity happening mostly on the internet, but there was no market for it. And so
wait,
when I saw
NFT, sorry, I just didn't know this. There's art with like GitHub repos on like like NFT art.
Well, so before NFTs, like people would still create this type of art, just they weren't really selling it. And that was kind of like like I would even make this art and be like, could you like sell someone a GitHub repo? Like that's kind of weird. Like like where this interesting question around like, is that art collectible? Like, what does patronage look like for digital artists? And so, yeah. So then when I saw NFTs, I was like, oh, wow, this is like an extremely simple solution. It fits this problem really well. Like I myself have like wondered if I could sell a piece of digital art or anything. And, there is in contemporary art, like a market for digital art, just it's kind of like a smaller subset. And so like my sort of like hypothesis is like, well, in the next 20 years, there's going to be more digital art, not less of it created. And so like, if I think eventually that end of the market becomes much larger.
So is the issue with digital art without NFTs, is it that it's harder to have it maintain its scarcity? I mean, the fact that it's digital means that it can be infinitely reproduced because, it's just like ones and zeros. And so that means it's, it would be harder for the artists to monetize their work and have it be something unique that somebody can own. But NFTs now obviously kind of change that. And so is that kind of like the key thing that needed to happen for digital art to really start to take off?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I like to think about the NFT as sort of like a certificate of authenticity. So it's like, it can be created by the artist. It has like a digital signature, like essentially built into it. You can see how old it is. Whereas like, that's something like a JPEG, like, if you're technically capable, you can just go edit the metadata. So you could say like, oh, this file was created in 1972. And there's not like, it's kind of hard to tell. Whereas like with an NFT, that kind of like the extra context for the piece of art, you can just kind of embed. So yeah, I think like that's kind of like the game changing thing. You now have this bearer asset basically that says, the artist who created this says that I'm the owner because I have this NFT.
Perfect. Okay, so Super Rare was born as a platform to buy and sell these these art pieces attached to these certificates of ownership, which are NFTs.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
Got it. Okay, so like, what year was this? What was the kind of initial, the initial days of Super Rare like?
Sure. So I think we started working on the early prototypes kind of late 2017 and then launched April of 2018. So, launched right into crypto winter. So it was an exciting time to launch a new product.
Oh my God. And what was that like? I mean, if you can maybe draw a parallel between, running an NFT marketplace in 2018 versus now.
Sure. So, I mean, yeah, it was very interesting, right? Like, I think like today you look at the market and people are raising like, $10 million with like an idea and a pitch deck. Whereas like in 2018, we had like a live product, we were making sales, like, it wasn't like significant amounts of money, but it was still like totally working. But yeah, it was essentially completely impossible to raise money at the time. So it was very different,
Wow.
But it was also like kind of like tight knit, right? Like the people who like would join the Telegram, is it like a close knit family almost?
At the time, like maybe I wasn't like really involved in the NFT world, but I don't remember it being like NFTs having like such a huge community. Like I don't know that there even like within crypto that people kind of understood what NFTs were. Do you think that's right? Yeah. Are people like just now starting to realize kind of the potential for this?
Yeah, I think that's like exactly spot on. Like the really early NFT enthusiasts, like were more like crypto dabblers. So it's like kind of weird art people who are also technologists. So kind of like had some interest in crypto, were also interested in art, or like the artists. Some of them are just folks that like, we would reach out to and say like, hey, we have this, this new website. Like, do you want to try it? And it was definitely not like the huge crypto whales. Like I think early on people were just like, that's ridiculous. It's too simple. Like it's just not going to work. And I think also like it was like the crypto kitties like initial hype wave. And so like people were like, like digital cats, it's a fad. Like it's not actually going to be a thing. So it was more, I don't know, kind of like the artists or like tinkerers who were like really interested in NFTs kind of early on.
Got it. And I guess like that community stayed and then grew over time until now where it's just like an explosion. Like how did you see that kind of evolution in terms of just like users and artists on Super Rare?
Yeah, it was basically slow, steady growth until almost about like exactly a year ago. I think that's when like we really started to see numbers starting to jump. And so for us, it was like there were a couple artists who I had just been following on Instagram for a long time. And then like a couple of them applied, like one of them specifically is this guy, Algo Mystic, who does pretty interesting kind of 3D work. And I was just like, no fucking way. Like, this is crazy. Like, I've been following this guy on Instagram for like, 4 years. That's incredible. Because like the first 2 years I would like pitch artists and they were like, I don't really know what you're talking about. Like, it sounds like a scam. Like, I heard people get their money stolen with Bitcoin, and you're like, that's not exactly what I'm, so, it was like the artists who were interested, like, it was like, much more household names, I would say. Mm-hmm. And then on the collector side, just a lot of the early collectors would like, say hi and poke around and like join the Discord or the Telegram at the time. And then we just started seeing like kind of like random whales who was like, well, do you know who this is? Like, I don't know who this is. Like, do you know who this is? And like nobody on the team knew who these collectors were. So that was also very exciting.
Oh, nice. So what do you think sparked this recent boom in NFTs?
Yeah, I think a big part of it has to do with just like general crypto sentiment. Like, I think like a couple of years ago, it was like, everything crypto was dead again. And then, with like the resurgence of like DeFi or like DeFi really making a name for itself and kind of like proving like, here's something, like Ethereum is more than just ICOs. Like, look, here are these like different lending protocols. People started to like take it a little bit more seriously, and then it kind of compounded. Like the success in DeFi helped. I think it helped people like reimagine like the different NFT use cases, and like 2 years later, a lot of infrastructure had been built. So there was just kind of like a confluence of events that was sort of like the right time.
Okay, so you mentioned, or I saw this written on one of SuperRare's latest posts, and I was hoping you could expand on this because I thought it was super interesting. So you wrote, unlike past artistic revolutions, this one affects more than the medium or style. It's a revolution of both form and function, curation and collection.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, there's a bunch of different reasons. So one that I think is very interesting is just like, if you think about NFTs, they can be like many different mediums. So it's like AR, VR, we have like video, audio, like, so there's like the form itself is super interesting. And then you're also seeing like that manifesting in how people collect, which I think is super interesting as well. So it's sort of like a new breed of collector. And I think that also ties into the fact that it's like totally global, right? I think like previous art movements were almost like geographically isolated. So it's like, like has something happening in London and then like New York or like, in Mexico City. Whereas like this is sort of like happening all together. So it's like just sort of an art revolution that we haven't really seen with so many things happening all at once. So it's like many different mediums taking place, like a new model for patronage, essentially. And I think it's the first artistic revolution that's happened while we've had the internet. So it's like really, I think, more interesting in a lot of ways. And then kind of like to top it all off, there's this open data set being generated about the art that we've also never had, kind of like, because of the internet, but like with NFTs, like all of these certificates of authenticity, if that's how you want to think about them, they're all like on Ethereum or like some layer one or a side chain, but it's still public data. Whereas like if you look at contemporary art markets, most of the good data is proprietary and you need like a subscription to access it. It's not heavily advertised. It's sort of this like, I don't know, dirty secret that like people are really looking at the pricing data, even though all the serious collectors use it, all the serious galleries use it, but it's kind of like happening, behind the scenes almost. And so I think there's just so many different pieces that are different this time around.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, an art revolution in kind of the age of the internet and like having just blockchain tech injected into it is just like supercharging the art world, I guess.
Yeah. And
okay, so like about SuperRare specifically, there are a handful of other NFT platforms. What's kind of special about SuperRare? Like, where do you see it like having, I don't know if an edge, but like, how does it differentiate?
Yeah, so I think, with SuperRare, like we were one of the first platforms to specialize. So I think like, like really wanted to build a place dedicated to art. Also kind of like early on decided that we felt like it should be curated to some extent and not just like an open platform where like people could post anything or anyone could post, which I think is like, sort of counterintuitive. If you think about how like a lot of like Web2 platforms, it was just like, just get the most users and the most content and then you're going to win. I don't necessarily think that same model works for art specifically. And so I think we've really thought a lot about how the art should be viewed or consumed or whatever, however you want to like phrase it. But like thinking about like the interface almost should like get out of the way and like just be like really let the art speak for itself. So it's kind of like really bled into the brand and like the design of the platform itself, just thinking through like, okay, from start to finish, like how does this experience work for a collector, and like how does it work for an artist, and like really trying to build the right tool set for an art ecosystem. Whereas I think like, there's a lot of discussion around NFTs, and they're like super exciting because they can be anything. It's like video game items and virtual land and all these different things, which are all exciting. Like, don't get me wrong. I think they're all really exciting use cases. Just like, I think kind of long term, we're going to end up with almost like vertical specific experiences, because you kind of want the UX to be a little bit more different. Like if you're shopping for virtual land, you kind of need different context about the asset than you do if you're buying a domain name, for example.
Totally. Super interesting. Okay. And then I guess one huge difference is your token and DAO. Like not many platforms are doing this. So why did you decide to issue a token? Like what's the reasoning behind this? And if you can kind of explain how the token works and how the DAO works, and how this can I don't know, what does that have to do with just like art, and how can that make the experience better for artists and collectors?
Yeah, sure. So we recently announced kind of like Super 2.0, and part of that announcement was the airdrop of the Rare token. We're myself and my co-founders have like, early on, we're just very excited about decentralization generally. Like, like Super Rare is non-custodial, it always has been. And so I think that's really been a core part of like what we wanted to do, is kind of like build with and experiment with these, these crypto primitives. One of those being, like having a token for the community. And at the same time, thinking about like kind of what's made Super Rare special to date is the thought that went into the curation. And so like, could you build sort of like a simple but effective curation system, that got the community involved, so we could potentially like scale up, right? Like Super Rare in like the previous state was kind of limited to the number of applications our team could review. They're also limited by their own kind of like internal biases or opinions about what's good, what's not good. And so we released the Super like the Rare token, and the idea being that like we'll be able to kind of like harvest the whole like the hive mind and get it involved. It's like the genius for curation from everyone versus like just our own opinion, and kind of like how it's actually going to work. So we announced what we're calling Super Rare Spaces, which are essentially independently curated parts of Super Rare. And, one analogy might be like a subreddit, where it's like, that's curated content, built around one core theme. And so these spaces within Super Rare could be, potentially a DAO, it could be an art collective, it could be an individual gallerist, it could be a gallery. That's kind of like open to what Rare token holders want to see. And they'll be voted in on a bi-weekly cadence by the token holders.
Okay, so spaces are, I guess, like, are they collections of art?
So, yeah, good question. So the space operators will be able to whitelist their own artists. And so who could they'll be like, it's kind of like open-ended collections. So it's almost like an independently operated, like basically taking all the tools that we've built and sort of like letting a person or a team kind of use them how they want. So they can have, whichever artist they want, kind of like minting in their space. They can like run their own drops, show off whatever art they want to show off. So it's, yeah.
Okay, so it's more akin to a gallery, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we're kind of thinking about them like small galleries spaces within Super Rare.
Okay, and then Rare tokens are the ones who can kind of curate these spaces. Like they vote on what spaces get approved on Super Rare and what artists are able to show their work on these spaces?
So it's just the form. So it's just approving the new space operators. So basically, we kind of like looked at a bunch of the different kind of like governance mechanisms that were out there and settled on like, okay, people will submit a proposal for how they want to run a space, and then we'll give token holders the opportunity to vote on a new one. And so that like basically the space operator has like full curatorial discretion once it's been onboarded. Yep.
Okay. So rare tokens decide on who the gallerists are, and then the gallerists then have like full like free reign on whatever goes in their gallery.
Yep. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. Cool. And so can anyone who owns like rare tokens participate, or is there like a certain threshold that you need to meet? Like, I don't know, like any like participation requirements or anything like that?
So yeah, anyone who holds the rare tokens can participate. Kind of like the first iteration or like how it's structured now. There is like the Rare Foundation has a council, and those folks will kind of review proposals. And once they make it past review, then they're up for vote. And so anyone who has tokens can participate in those votes. And then we're also experimenting with kind of like different delegation mechanisms to see, what else might be interesting there. But to start, it's one token, one vote.
Cool. And can anyone make a proposal?
Yep, anyone can make a proposal.
Okay. Why did you decide it was necessary to have this kind of additional council overseeing proposals?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. I mean, like, I think the more we dug into governance, like one of the things, we wanted, like we've talked about, like the space is blowing up right now. There's like, it's super competitive. So one of the balance is kind of like, okay, we really do want to like pursue this path of decentralization, but at the same time, like, want to be able to ship features quickly. And, I don't know, I'm sure you've seen some various like community, right? Like communities can kind of get bogged down in like, well, what is governance and like, what can people do? So like, we really wanted to make it a very specific use case and kind of like, learn with, like we're community members as well. Like we're all learning here, right? So it's like, make it as simple as possible. And so by having the council, we wanted to like keep the bar high. So it's like, you still have like, we didn't want like half-baked proposals where it's like, okay, vote on these 3,000 proposals, 1,000 of which weren't even real attempts at actually wanting to do this. So it's sort of like a filtering mechanism to make the voting more effective is the idea.
Okay. But I guess like if the reason for having a token was to scale this quickly and not have that kind of bottleneck of your team having to go through what gets put on Super Rare, then this council would need to like not, is it like not as thorough review, because otherwise you'll end up with like the same bottleneck, right? Or is it just like, okay, this meets like the specification and that's it? Or does it like go through kind of the content?
It's more about meeting the specification. Yeah. So it's like, well, did they fill everything out? And then I think the other thing to think about is like, right now there's just one curatorial team. So like with each space that's added, it's sort of like exponential growth in the amount of curation happening because they can all whitelist as many artists as they want.
See. Right.
So like the second one is already going to double the curation capacity. And like, so each one, it'll be, anyway, that's the idea. We'll see how it works, but.
Okay. No, yeah, that makes sense. I don't know, like I'm sure there's like tons of people thinking about how to game these systems, because like whenever you have like a token vote and like token holders deciding things, there's an opportunity of getting to a situation where it's like like a pay to play thing where it's like, okay, whoever has the most tokens can get on the platform. I don't know, like, what are you thinking around that to make sure that you're actually kind of like valuable or like talented artists are the ones who are getting in, not the ones who somehow were able to kind of amass a big amount of tokens and vote themselves in or vote a friend in, or I don't know. I'm sure there's like tons of like game theory and like governance attacks.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like we've talked a lot about, like, I think, the stuff Gitcoin's doing with the quadratic voting is really interesting. I think, I mean, like for us, and like just as a team, like really the whole ethos is always like, if you look at the first version of Super Rare, like it was not very pretty. It was just like, okay, let's get something live that works and have someone use it and like see what happens. So I think like one of the nice things about this type of voting is it's not like, we have like $1 billion of like, tokens locked up in a lending protocol. And like, someone recently asked if like what I thought about like, someone taking out a flash loan to like attack the curation governance.
Right. Yeah.
Which might be kind of interesting. You're like, well, someone really wanted to launch a space. They went to a lot of work here. So I think, I mean, like my general thought is that it'll be iterative, right? Like I don't really think we're going to get it absolutely right at first, but I think like our main goals were like, okay, we want to get the community more involved. We want to open up curation so it's not just our team. But we also want to kind of like maintain a high bar. Like, we talked about like invite systems, but then it's like you're just kind of like potentially just giving your friend an invite. And so like, I don't know, this was sort of like the simplest model that we settled on. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see how the game theory works out after the first couple votes, and I can let you know in about a month. Yeah. But I do think, I think we'll probably have high voter turnout just because it's a pretty fun thing to be voting on. So, I mean, like, I could be wrong, but like, if you think about, I don't know, like a protocol like Maker, which I think is super interesting. And like, for me personally, like as somebody who loves like, the ethos behind it, I think DAI is like an amazing product. I've never voted in a Maker governance vote. But I do I think already we're seeing, like, if you just look at the Discord, like there's a ton of interesting spaces that people are kind of like brainstorming, how they want them to work. So it'll be interesting to see.
Very cool. Can you give me a sense of activity on Super Rare, like daily or monthly active users, volume, and if that's changed at all after the token?
Yeah, so the number of, I guess, like, so one thing we kind of differentiate between users and collectors. So the number of users on the platform is actually super high, like people who are like browsing art or like checking out the activity feed every day. So we have about 300,000 people like who are like looking at art on Super Rare every day.
Every day, 300,000?
Like, yeah, looking at art.
Wow. That's really cool.
But then the number of collectors is obviously significantly lower. So I think the active number of collector addresses right now is about 3,500. And then of those, it's like maybe a couple hundred, what we define as an active collector a day. So that's like somebody making a bid, so it doesn't necessarily mean they were successful, just like some kind of like intent to collect. And we just recently hit $100 million in kind of like lifetime volume. And I think are on track to do about 30 million this month.
Wow. Okay, so that's crazy. 100 million lifetime. So since you launched in 2018, and this month you've already done like just August, right? Like in August you've done 30% of all of your like historical volume.
Yeah, pretty much. And then in March, that was the first time we got close to 30 million. So there's 2 months that have roughly like 60% of the lifetime volume. So it's
Oh, wow.
Fascinating.
Picking up so quickly. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to ask you about kind of the new like super rare V2 or 2.0 is the share that the super rare team is taking from sales. So and correct me if I have these numbers wrong, but super rare team used to take 18% of primary sales and 2% of secondary sales. But now all of that, it goes to a community treasury overseen by Rare Tokens. So the super rare team is not taking anything from like primary or secondary market sales?
Yep, that's correct.
So this is pretty kind of mind-blowing. Like, why did you decide to structure sales this way? And I guess the main question is, how do you make sure that the team is incentivized in the long term to continue building the project? Or is kind of the idea that